This is a 2002 Think Neighbor, and it's a car. Mostly, it's also a very strange Ford. And yes, it's a Ford, even though it was built in Norway and it doesn't have doors. If you're ready for a walk down a very strange part of Ford's history, well, let's review the quirks and features of the Ford Think Neighbor. Before I get started, big news! This Think Neighbor is currently for sale and it's being auctioned live on Cars and Bids. This is a low-speed electric vehicle, very quirky with some interesting and exciting modifications, and it can be yours on Cars and Bids. So, once you finish watching this video, click the link in the description below to visit the live auction for this Think Neighbor, where you can bid on it and buy it only on Cars and Bids. Alright, time for the quirks and features of the clearly quirky Think Neighbor. And first, I want to give you a little background on what this is and what Ford had to do with it. So, Think, the company, this was the name of a car company. It was created in the early 1990s in Norway, and initially it had a different name, but it was later rebranded as Think. And the goal was micro-mobility, not like scooters, but little tiny cars that were intended for sort of very small distances in urban areas, sort of like the smart car before the smart car. Actually, these were the days before that had come out, but the idea was fairly similar. Now, Ford seemed to like this idea, and in the late 90s, Ford bought this company, Think, this Norwegian company, and soon after their very first car came out, and it was called the Ford Think City Car. And it was a lot more legitimate than this. It had like doors and a roof and a whole thing, but it was small, really small, and again, intended for short electric trips in city centers. The goal was not a car to drive all the way around everywhere, but just sort of small micro-mobility in small spaces, which remains a pretty neat idea that a lot of different companies are exploring. This was 25 years ago. It was a little bit ahead of its time. Maybe less ahead of its time was Think's next project, which is this. This is called the Think Neighbor, and it's what's technically classified as a low-speed vehicle or a neighborhood electric vehicle, which is actually a United States government classification of a type of electric small car that's intended to drive around in sort of urban areas with lower speed limits, such as this. Now, the Think Neighbor, the target demographic, was things like colleges and universities, large campuses where you might have to drive around but don't necessarily need an entire large vehicle, or like hospital campuses or corporate campuses or golf courses. Obviously, you've probably already figured out the similarities between this and a golf cart. In theory, these were limited to 25 miles an hour in order to qualify for the neighborhood electric vehicle regulation, which exempted this car from a lot of big-time safety stuff, although I got this one up to 29 miles an hour when I was really pushing it earlier, so apparently it can go a little faster. Now, these came out back in 2002, and in the end, Ford Think produced around 7,100 units of the Think Neighbor. There was a two-seater, there was this, the four-seater, and there was also the utility model, which was 2 seats and a pickup truck bed. Now, I can't find anywhere on the internet the horsepower figure for this vehicle, but suffice it to say, it was not particularly high. The top speed, like I said, under 30 miles an hour, the range was around 30 total miles of driving, and you could recharge the vehicle completely in about 4 to 8 hours using a standard household-style power outlet. You don't need a big car charger for this. You just plug it in, go about your business, and it's ready to go slowly. So let's talk quirks and features, starting with the rather interesting modifications to this one. You will notice when you're looking at this Think Neighbor that it has racing stripes, a pair of racing stripes going down the front, and then also same deal in back, more racing stripes back there. That's because the owner of this particular Think Neighbor really leaned into the Ford connection in order to make it more exciting and special, and there's a lot of Ford-related cosmetic upgrades to this Think Neighbor that really help it stand out. Let's actually start in back. Around the racing stripes, you can see a large Shelby badge spelled out across the entire rear of this Think Neighbor. And then above that in the center, this Shelby GT500 badge, like you might see on the rear on the trunk lid of a GT500 Mustang. Up front, you can see the Cobra logo, front and center, like you might find it in a Mustang Cobra, along with hood pins, which was a Shelby Mustang kind of touch, especially in the late 1960s, added to this Think Neighbor. Now, when you go inside, there's more Shelby and Ford stuff. You can see another Shelby Cobra emblem in here, along with the Eleanor badge, which of course was the famous car from Gone in 60 Seconds, the Shelby Mustang that Nick Cage tried to tame. Well, you can't imagine him taming a Think Neighbor. Now, can you? There's also a wood steering wheel reminiscent of those old 60s Shelby Mustang models. That's something you probably wouldn't see on other Think Neighbors, but it's here, adding some flair to this one. And on the passenger side of the dashboard, you have Carroll Shelby's signature, which I am absolutely certain is legitimate. He's going around signing Shelby Cobras, Shelby Mustangs, and I bet he signed this Think Neighbor before he died. He lent his own stamp of approval to this very special muscle car. As for another interesting modification beyond the badging, how about the quad exhaust? 4 big chrome exhaust pipes back here because this is a Shelby. Of course, in reality, this is an electric golf cart thing that has basically no power, and these are hooked on to nothing. But the quad exhausts do help sell the Shelbiness of it, and they add a little bit of fun and delightfulness to the Think Neighbor. Now, among all the cosmetic upgrades, the very best, and the reason I chose this Think Neighbor to review, undoubtedly the wheels, which are actually Ford Mustang wheels. You can see these come off of the base model V6 S197 Mustang, the like 05, 06 Mustang. These are those wheels. They're not GT500 wheels, I have a suspicion, because these were the largest size you could put on the Think Neighbor to make them work, but these are actually Ford Mustang wheels. And since the Think was a Ford product, I guess it has a Ford bolt pattern, and so these wheels lined up to make it work. Actual Mustang wheels on the Think Neighbor. And in fact, I gotta say, all of the up badging on this car is done pretty well and kind of funny. Normally, I am not a fan of up badging, making your 340i look like an M3 with a badge. But in the case of a Think Neighbor, where it's pretty clear that no one will be mistaking this for a Shelby Mustang, I think this stuff is kind of in good humor and in good taste. A little bit of cheeky fun to add some fun to the Think Neighbor. And indeed, the Think Neighbor could use some fun, because aside from the up badging and the cosmetic improvements, there's not that much with this vehicle to be particularly delighted about. Let me take you on a tour of its quirks and features. We begin inside, where you can see 4 seats. It's got 2 up front and 2 in back. 4 basic seats. And interestingly, when you start exploring the Think Neighbor, despite its appearance, it does have some of the elements of a car. For example, you have 3-point seat belts, both front and rear, in the Think Neighbor, which I wasn't really expecting. You also have turn signal stalk, as you can see, like in a normal vehicle, probably borrowed from an actual Ford product, and a windshield wiper stalk over on the other side, because you have a windshield wiper in your Think Neighbor, which again adds a little bit of, oh, maybe this is a car to the experience. You also have rear view mirrors, which you don't usually get in a golf cart. You can see over on the sides, you have a driver's wing mirror and a passenger wing mirror, and a regular rear view mirror tacked onto the windshield to see what's going on behind you. So there's some car stuff to this. But then you look a little closer and you discover a lot is missing. For example, not sure if you noticed, there are no doors. This vehicle has no doors at all. You just sort of slide your way in. Now, I should point out, there was an optional door situation. It was a vinyl thing that you could unroll, and it would roll down to cover the opening opening here in case it was raining. And it had windows and you could look out. They were plastic windows. And then when the rain stopped, you would roll it back up and sort of tie it off to the roof and you were all good. But here in Southern California, we don't need such rain-based accoutrement. And so we go doorless, just like you would in a Jeep Wrangler off the trails. That's what the Think Neighbor reminds me of. Now, another thing that you're missing in the Think Neighbor is a gear lever. You do not have a gear lever in the middle where you shift it into drive. You do have a parking brake, which again adds to the car-ness of the whole experience, but there is no gear lever. Instead, the ignition keyhole situation is the gear lever. So when you want to turn the car off, you turn it to this black dot. That's sort of the on-off and where you stick in the key. If you want to go to reverse, you twist the key to the left, to the R, and then you go into reverse. And if you want to go into drive, you twist the key all the way to the right to the D, and then you're going forward and into drive. There's no lever to do that. Instead, it's based on the position of the key. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly is the T on this ignition switch? And the answer is, that's turf mode. And if you switch it into the T, it limits the speed of this vehicle to 15 miles an hour. Turf mode is intended for when you are driving on turf, such as a grass golf course. That's another thing you don't often see in a car. Another giveaway that this isn't your usual car. It has a turf mode. And next up, we get into the storage situation in this vehicle. Interestingly, you have two good-sized storage compartments. In the passenger area, there is a glove box, which is actually quite large. Open it up, and that's where you can put paperwork or anything else that you don't want flying around, which is a real possibility in this car because there are no sides. Now, you can also store stuff in the trunk. In the back, you can see behind the rear seats, there's a large trunk here. Open it up, and you can put more stuff in here that, again, you don't want flying around. And like I mentioned before, there was a pickup version of the Think Neighbor. So if you wanted even more storage space, you get the utility, they called it. It was the rarest of the three body styles, just like the AM General Hummer. The pickup is the rarest. So if you're going for rarity, that's the one you want to get. Now, it's worth pointing out that the front compartment is not storage. You open this up and it's actually open to below. So if you put something in here, it's just going to fall completely through the Think Neighbor and fall onto the ground. So do not use your front compartment for storage. You don't get that, only the glove box and the rear trunk. And it's worth pointing out up front, since we're talking about it, up here you can see the Think logo, which was the only logo that came on this vehicle from the factory. There were no Ford logos actually put on this car from the factory. You only had that Think logo kind of debossed into the plastic up front. And yes, the I in Think is actually an exclamation point, which adds to kind of the fun nature of the whole thing. It's not just Think, it's As for technology, it's pretty limited. You don't have much. You do have a central screen, but it is merely a display screen, this circular screen, and it doesn't show much. On the top, you have the speed you're currently traveling. Below that is your odometer reading. You can see this thing has traveled a mere 110 miles, although for all we know, that might be high mileage in the Think Neighbor community. Below that, you have a little warning light that tells you if your handbrake is on, your parking brake, and then there is a battery icon that shows you how charged your battery is. Now, interestingly, there is also a second screen between the seats that also shows you your battery charge. You can see right here, it gives you a percentage, so you have two separate battery screens in this vehicle. Now, one interesting thing about this central display screen is that it will also show you if your turn signals are on. You put the signal on and the little flashing arrow actually appears next to the screen. It was sort of hidden before the signal came on, but then it's flashing in kind of a cool way. Surprising they integrated that so well, considering it's not really necessary. Also rather interesting around here to see it's 6 different screws that are sort of holding whatever this is in place. I imagine they're not actually doing much work. I think they're really there just for style. Using screws for style don't often often see that in the car world, but you do see it in the Think Neighbor community. You also have a little 12-volt outlet you can use to power your devices, the cover of which is not actually linked to the outlet, so it falls and then you have to keep track of it if you want to plug anything in to charge it. And you have a plug over on the other side to the left of the steering column where you plug in the Think City on a normal power outlet like I mentioned before. And as for other quirks and features, well, that's basically it. You do have cup holders in this vehicle. You can see on the dashboard there is a driver cup holder right in front of your field of vision and a passenger cup holder as well, along with a couple of little plastic compartments where you can put stuff while you're driving. You also have rear cup holders. They're integrated into this silver part here, sort of between the seats. You can drop it down, and then backseat passengers have cup holders as well, which I guess is kind of a nice touch. And of course, it must be mentioned, this Think Neighbor also has a Boomin stereo system. It is mounted on the rear ceiling, which isn't the usual place where you would find a stereo in a lot of cars, but that's where you find it here. And it's always sort of blinking colors. It's kind of on and telling you that it's on basically at all times, which is kind of weird, but that is the situation. So just in case you want to drive around your Think and blast tunes on your corporate campus while you're going from building 7 to building 2R, you can do that with your giant speaker, which I assume was not factory fitted, but maybe it was an option, and this thing has it for all of the fun that you'd be having while driving this vehicle. Now, I mentioned that this was a 2002 model, and indeed it's over 20 years old and it hasn't been manufactured since. Sadly, if you're looking for a new Think Neighbor, it is not possible. Ford made about 7,000 of these, like I mentioned, and then they got out of the Think business. It was all over. Ford washed their hands clean, bailed out of Think, sold it to somebody else, and that was really the beginning of the end for the Think situation. A few years later, Think did come out with another car, another version of the Think City that had initially come out. This one was more modern and again more like a traditional car with doors and a roof and all that, but it wasn't a huge seller, and before long Think closed down. It was all over, and we only have remnants now to look back at this storied automaker and this unusual chapter in Ford's history. Think, with an exclamation point for an I. Anyway, you might be wondering what it's like to drive a Think, a glorified golf cart with various Shelby and Ford Mustang modifications. I know I'm wondering what it's like, and I'm also wondering if I'm going to get arrested. Let's find out. All right, driving the Think Neighbor. In this video, Doug's going to try to drive around in a golf cart without getting pulled over. Now, this isn't actually a golf cart. Like I mentioned, it's a neighborhood electric vehicle, and technically it's legal on these streets because the speed limit is low enough. However, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if the police draw their attention to this vehicle. I certainly would. So my first impression of the Think Neighbor is that it's pretty open here. Now, there was an option. You could select drop down vinyl siding and with vinyl windows that would come down, and then you could roll them up when it wasn't raining. So you could have the feeling of doors if you wanted to, although there was never an actual option to have doors. That would have gone too far. Now, this particular Think Neighbor has apparently traveled 107 miles from new, which strikes me as a pretty severe distance. I know I wouldn't want to be driving 107 total miles in this, although I bet it was done many small miles at a time, like I'm doing right now. In this car, you are very exposed to the world. I can't help but sit in this thing and think, that at any point if I get hit, I will die. The only thing that's providing structure in this vehicle is some light metal A-pillars, B-pillars that aren't really actually anything. They're there to hold up the roof, not to provide any sort of structure in the case of an accident. The driving experience is basically what you'd expect, which is to say it's sort of like a golf cart, but more substantial. If you've ever driven a golf cart or a Power Wheels, it's pretty much like that, just a little bit more substantial. It has more of a vehicle style feel to it, in the sense that it's got bigger tires. You can tell there's a little bit more to it than just a regular old golf cart. But I want to stress a little bit more. It's not a lot more. And I've seen parents drive around little kids in these, and I'm just like in car seats, and I'm just like, you think you're not in a golf cart. But you think you're going to have some safety benefits because it's more legit than a golf cart. You are mistaken. It's actually pretty quick getting this up to speed, but unfortunately speed is 25. So it doesn't really do much beyond that. But it is surprisingly quick, like most electric vehicles. The turn signals don't cancel, and there's a pretty decent amount of tire noise and wind noise since, you know, driving a golf cart. For some reason, the brakes require significant force in order to get this thing stopped, which I wouldn't expect considering that I can pick this vehicle up with my bare hands. But that is, in fact, the situation. I don't think it's broken. I just think that's how it is. Visibility is great. You can really see anywhere. Realistically, I'm not sure that this would fit most people's life situations, although I do think it would fit more people's life situations than people realize. Like, I just have this feeling that most people, like, driving around their neighborhood to go get, you know, tacos or a pizza or ice cream or go pick up, like, they dry clean. Like, this could actually be a pretty reasonable vehicle for a lot of people instead of getting in a giant normal car that's gas powered. But I wouldn't fault people, most people, at least people who are used to driving cars, for not wanting to drive in this because it's quite an experience. And I'm not entirely, you don't necessarily feel that confident at any point that you're not going to be hit by a real car when you're sharing the road with real cars. Nonetheless, as tiny vehicles like this go, this one is a one of them. And it definitely feels like I'm driving a slightly more substantial golf cart on the road. And so that's the Ford Think Neighbor. You got to admit, one of the weirdest Fords. We're a long way from the Explorer and the Mustang, even if this does have Mustang wheels. Anyway, now it's time to give the Think Neighbor a Doug score. And the Doug score is here, 27 out of 100, which is low. Below the Mitsubishi i-MiEV, but then the Think Neighbor is sort of below the i-MiEV in terms of actual carness. Still, even though I laugh about the Think Neighbor, it's actually pretty perfect for what it does, driving around college campuses or corporate office parks with all the range, charge, and practicality you need. It's also shockingly affordable, with used examples like this selling for only a few $1,000s, making it a particularly strong value if your use case fits with the Think's limitations.